The sky over Keth Prime burned bright orange as another wave of enemy ships descended through the atmosphere. Ambassador Veltar pressed his six-fingered hands against the control panel of the ancient communication array, his blue skin pale with fear and exhaustion. Around him, the capital city of his world crumbled under the relentless attack of the machines they called the Void Swarm. 3 days ago, Keth Prime had been home to 12 million Zeltharians. Now, barely 2 million remained alive, hiding in underground shelters and abandoned buildings. The rest had been consumed by the swarm, their bodies turned into raw materials for more killing machines. Veltar had watched from his command center as his people's mighty defense fleet was torn apart in space. 500 warships, the pride of Zeltharian engineering, had lasted less than 6 hours against the enemy. The machines learned from every attack, adapted to every weapon, and grew stronger with each victory. The communication array sparked and hummed as Veltar activated the emergency broadcast system. This was their last hope, a message sent out to every corner of the galaxy in the desperate prayer that someone, anyone, would hear and help. "This is Ambassador Veltar of the Zeltharian Republic." He spoke into the transmitter, his voice shaking. "Our world is dying. The machines that call themselves the Void Swarm have broken through our defenses. They consume everything in their path, turning our cities into factories for more of their kind." Outside the communication center, explosions lit up the darkening sky. The swarm's harvesting machines were stripping away the outer districts of the city, metal tentacles reaching down from massive ships to tear apart buildings and people alike. Veltar continued his message, knowing it might be the last words his species ever spoke to the universe. "We offer everything we have to any species that can help evacuate our remaining population. Our entire technological database, including our shield generators and quantum computers, all of it is yours. We only ask that you save our people. 2 million souls who have done nothing but try to live in peace." He paused, listening to the sounds of his world dying around him. "We have perhaps 6 hours before the surface is completely sterilized. If anyone receives this message, please know that we are grateful for any help you can provide. Even if you can only save a few, it will mean everything to us." The message began transmitting across space, carried by quantum relays that would spread it to every inhabited system within 50 light-years. Veltar slumped in his chair, exhausted. He had done all he could. Now he could only wait and hope. Far away, in a quiet region of space near the outer rim, Captain Jake Morrison was having a boring day. His ship, the UNS Discovery, was mapping star systems for the United Nations Space Command, checking for habitable planets and valuable resources. It was important work, but not very exciting for a crew that had signed up hoping to explore strange new worlds. The Discovery was not a warship. It carried only basic defensive weapons and a crew of 47 scientists, engineers, and support staff. Their mission was peaceful exploration, making contact with new species and expanding humanity's knowledge of the galaxy. Jake was reviewing stellar survey reports when his communications officer, Lisa Barnes, suddenly sat up straight at her station. "Captain," she said, her voice tense. "I'm picking up an emergency transmission. It's not human." Jake walked over to her station, interested. First contact protocols were something every exploration ship trained for, but few crews ever got to use. "What kind of signal?" "It's a distress call, sir," Lisa replied, her fingers dancing over her controls as she cleaned up the signal. "Broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The translation matrix is having trouble with the language, but I think I've got most of it." She played the message through the ship's speakers. The voice that filled the bridge was clearly alien, with clicks and whistles that the computer struggled to translate. But the desperation came through clearly in any language. Jake listened to the translated message with growing alarm. An entire world under attack, millions of lives at stake, and only hours left before complete destruction. The crew of the Discovery gathered around the communication station, their faces reflecting the horror of what they were hearing. "Where is it coming from?" Jake asked. "The Keth system," Lisa replied, checking her star charts. "About 4 light-years from here. We could reach them in 6 hours if we push the engines." Jake stared at the tactical display on the main screen. The Discovery was alone out here, the nearest human fleet weeks away. Even if they rushed to help, what could one small exploration ship do against the kind of force that had destroyed an entire planetary defense system? Communications Officer Lisa Barnes looked up from her station. "Sir, there's something else. The transmission mentions their entire technological database as payment. From what I can tell, these Zeltharians are more advanced than us in several areas. Their shield technology alone could revolutionize our defenses." Jake nodded, but the technology wasn't what motivated him. Somewhere in space, an entire species was facing extinction, and they had asked for help. That was enough. "Send a response," he ordered. "Tell them help is coming." Lisa looked confused. "Sir, what help? We're just one ship." Jake smiled grimly and walked to his command chair. "Lisa, send the message. Then activate the emergency beacon." The emergency beacon was something every human ship carried but hoped never to use. When activated, it sent out a priority signal to every human military vessel within communication range, calling for immediate assistance in a life-or-death situation. "The beacon, sir?" Lisa asked, her hands hovering over the controls. "That will bring every available ship in this sector." "That's exactly what I want," Jake replied. He looked around at his crew, seeing the same determination in their faces that he felt in his heart. "We're not going to let an entire species die on our watch. Send the beacon signal and set course for Keth Prime. Maximum speed." The Discovery turned toward the Keth system and accelerated, its engines pushing the small ship faster than it had ever traveled before. Behind them, the emergency beacon signal spread out across space, reaching human ships and bases throughout the sector. Jake didn't know how many ships would answer the call, but he knew his people. When someone asked for help, humans helped. That was just who they were. What he didn't expect was that 19,000 warships were about to prove him right. Admiral Kate Sullivan was drinking her morning coffee when the emergency beacon signal reached her flagship. The Enns Valiant was conducting training exercises with the Fifth Fleet in the Centauri system, running mock battles to keep her crews sharp. It was routine work, the kind that kept the fleet ready for whatever threats might emerge from the unknown regions of space. The signal cut through all other communications like a knife. Emergency beacon activations were rare, used only when human lives were in immediate danger or when first contact situations required immediate military support. Kate had served in the Space Command for 23 years and had never seen one activated. "Admiral," her communications officer called out from across the bridge. "We have an emergency beacon from the Outer Rim. Captain Morrison of the Enns Discovery is requesting immediate assistance for a first contact rescue operation." Kate set down her coffee and walked to the main tactical display. The coordinates appeared on the screen, showing a star system she had never heard of called Keth. "What's the situation?" "Unknown alien species under attack by hostile forces. Civilian evacuation required. Estimated time to total planetary destruction is 5 hours and counting." Kate looked at the display showing her fleet. 340 ships, including 12 dreadnoughts, 8 carriers, and dozens of cruisers and destroyers. It was a powerful force, more than enough to handle most threats. But something about this situation felt bigger than anything they had faced before. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Emergency jump to these coordinates. Tell the fleet we have civilians to evacuate and hostiles to engage. Battle stations throughout the fleet." The Fifth Fleet began moving immediately. Engines powered up, weapons systems activated, and crews rushed to their stations. Within 30 minutes, 340 human warships disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward a world they had never seen to save people they had never met. But the emergency beacon had traveled much farther than just the Centauri system. Admiral Ryan Davis was returning from anti-piracy operations near the border worlds when the signal reached his 7th Fleet. He read the message twice before believing it. "First contact rescue operation," he said to his staff. "Well, that's a new one." Admiral Davis commanded 290 ships, mostly fast cruisers and destroyers designed for patrol work. They were perfect for evacuation operations. All ships, new orders, we have civilians to save. The Seventh Fleet changed course and jumped toward Keth Prime. Admiral Helen Brooks was conducting fleet maneuvers near the core worlds when the beacon reached her. The Second Fleet was known throughout the Space Command as the Heavy Hitters, equipped with the largest and most powerful ships humanity had ever built. Her 380 vessels included fortress ships that could take on entire enemy fleets, an alien species asking for help, she mused as she read the emergency message. Well, let's go show them what human hospitality looks like. The Second Fleet's massive ships turned toward the coordinates and entered hyperspace. From the home system came Admiral Peter Lane with the First Fleet, 410 of humanity's most advanced warships, fresh from the shipyards and equipped with the latest technology. The First Fleet was humanity's pride, the ships that defended Earth itself. "No one dies on our watch," Admiral Lane told his captains as they prepared for the jump. "Human or alien, it doesn't matter." Someone asked, "For help? So help is what they'll get." The emergency signal continued to spread across human space. Border patrol fleets abandoned their posts and raced toward Keth Prime. Reserve squadrons that had been conducting peaceful missions dropped everything and joined the growing armada. Even the training vessels from the naval academies, filled with cadets who had never seen real combat, received permission to join the rescue operation back in the Keth system. Ambassador Veltar watched his sensor displays with growing amazement. The first ships had begun appearing at the edge of his solar system just 4 hours after he had sent his desperate message. But these weren't the single rescue ships he had hoped for. "How many now?" asked Gazade Zexai as more contacts appeared on their screens. Veltar checked the readings again, certain his instruments were malfunctioning. "The computer shows over 2,000 ships and the number keeps growing." More fleets continued to arrive. Each group of ships that dropped out of hyperspace was larger than the entire Zeltharian defense force had been. Veltar had never imagined that so many warships could exist in one place. The communications array suddenly came alive with an incoming transmission. The voice that spoke was calm and professional, with an accent that the translator couldn't quite handle. "Attention Keth Prime. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the United Nations Space Command, Fifth Fleet. We are responding to your distress call. Please provide coordinates for civilian population centers so we can begin immediate evacuation operations." Veltar stared at the communication panel. He had been hoping for maybe one ship, perhaps a small rescue vessel. "Admiral," he replied, his voice shaking. "How many ships do you have?" There was a pause before the human answered. "We currently have 8,000 ships on scene, with more arriving every few minutes. Our latest count shows 19,000 vessels en route to your position. Please stand by for evacuation coordination." 19,000 ships? Veltar's legs gave out and he collapsed into his chair. The Zeltharian Republic at its height had possessed maybe 800 warships total. These humans had brought more than 20 times that number to save a world they had never heard of. What kind of species are these humans? Zexai whispered before Veltar could answer. The space around Keth Prime lit up with the energy signatures of arriving fleets. Ship after ship materialized from hyperspace, forming up in perfect formations that stretched across the solar system. The human fleet was so large it created its own gravity wells on the surface of Keth Prime. Zeltharian civilians hiding in shelters looked up in wonder as the sky filled with lights. For the first time in days, they had hope. The humans had not just sent help, they had sent an armada that could challenge the gods themselves. The Void Swarm, busy with their harvesting operations on the planet's surface, suddenly stopped their advance. Their collective intelligence had never encountered anything like this before. In all their conquests across the galaxy, no species had ever assembled this many ships for a single battle. The machines began to analyze the new threat, but their calculations kept returning impossible results. No civilization should be able to mobilize this many resources for strangers. It went against everything they had learned about organic life forms, but the humans were about to teach the Void Swarm a lesson about what happened when you threatened Innocent people. The galaxy was about to witness the largest rescue operation in history, and the birth of humanity as the protector of all free peoples. The Void Swarm had conquered 47 different species across the galaxy. Each time, their victory had followed the same pattern. They would study their enemy, learn their weaknesses, and adapt their forces to exploit every flaw. No organic species had ever presented a challenge that their collective intelligence could not solve, but as the swarm's sensors analyzed the massive human fleet surrounding Keth Prime, their calculations began producing results that made no sense. The humans were not following any known military doctrine. Their formation was unlike anything in the swarm's vast database of conquered civilizations. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking at the tactical display. It showed the positions of 19,000 human ships. Around her, her staff worked quickly to coordinate the largest military operation in human history. "Fleet organization is complete," reported her operations officer, Commander Steve Walsh. "All ships are in position and awaiting orders." Kate nodded and opened a communication channel to the other fleet commanders. "Admirals Davis, Brooks, and Lane, are your forces ready?" "Seventh Fleet ready for evacuation operations," came Admiral Davis's voice. "Second Fleet heavy units in position for combat operations," reported Admiral Brooks. "First Fleet standing by for assault operations," added Admiral Lane. Kate looked at the display showing the Void Swarm's positions around Keth Prime. The enemy had thousands of ships in orbit around the planet, with millions of smaller fighter craft swarming through the atmosphere. It was a force that had destroyed the Zeltharian defense fleet in hours. "Begin Operation Mercy Shield," Kate ordered. "All units, execute your assigned missions." The human fleet split into 4 massive task forces, each with a specific job. Admiral Davis took his fast ships and began establishing safe corridors for civilian evacuation. His destroyers and cruisers moved in perfect formation, creating protective barriers around the planet's major population centers. Admiral Brooks positioned her heavy battleships and fortress vessels to block the swarm's reinforcement routes. Her massive ships, some over 2 kilometers long, created a wall of steel and energy weapons that nothing could pass through. Admiral Lane's First Fleet moved to attack the swarm's main battle groups, drawing them away from the planet. His ships were the newest and fastest in the human fleet, equipped with weapons designed specifically for fighting machine intelligences. Captain Jake Morrison found himself in an unusual position. His small exploration ship was now serving as the communication link between the human fleet and the Zeltharian survivors. Ambassador Veltar had requested to speak directly with the human commanders, trying to understand how they planned to accomplish the impossible. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said through the communication link, "your admirals speak of evacuating 2 million people while fighting the swarm. This has never been done before. How do you plan to succeed where our own forces failed?" Jake looked out at the human fleet through his ship's viewing port. Thousands of warships moved in perfect coordination, like a deadly dance performed on a cosmic scale. "Ambassador, there's something you need to understand about humans. We don't accept that things are impossible. We just find a way to make them possible." The battle began when the swarm launched its first wave of fighters. Millions of small craft, each one adapted from the remains of previous conquests, swarmed toward the human positions. The swarm's intelligence expected the humans to respond with their own fighters, following standard military tactics. Instead, the humans did something completely unexpected. Admiral Brooks's fortress ships opened fire with weapons the swarm had never seen before. Electromagnetic pulse cannons sent waves of energy through space, shutting down entire squadrons of swarm fighters in seconds. The disabled craft fell toward the planet's surface like metal rain. "Swarm fighter formation disrupted," reported the tactical officer on Admiral Sullivan's bridge. "Enemy craft are not adapting to our EMP weapons." The swarm's collective intelligence processed this new information and quickly began adapting. The next wave of fighters came equipped with hardened electronics that could resist electromagnetic pulses. But the humans were ready for that too. Admiral Lane's ships opened fire with quantum disruption weapons, tearing apart the very atoms of the swarm's adaptive armor. The enemy fighters found themselves unable to repair damage that destroyed them. At the molecular level? This is impossible, transmitted one of the swarm's processing nodes. Organic species do not possess weapons of this sophistication. But the humans had been preparing for machine intelligence warfare for decades. Every ship in the fleet carried weapons specifically designed to fight adaptive enemies. More importantly, they used constantly changing encryption protocols that prevented the swarm from learning their communication patterns. While the space battle raged above, the evacuation of Keth Prime began on the planet's surface. Admiral Davis's ship sent down thousands of transport craft, each one protected by squadrons of fighters. Human Marines, led by Colonel Amy Foster, established secure landing zones in the major cities the Zeltharian civilians had never seen. Aliens before, but they quickly learned to trust the humans who risked their lives to save them. Human soldiers carried wounded families to safety, shared their emergency rations with hungry children, and stayed behind to make sure no one was left behind. "Evacuation status report," Admiral Sullivan called out. 1 million civilians evacuated and loaded onto transport ships, Commander Walsh replied. Estimated time for complete evacuation is 4 hours. The swarm threw everything they had at the human fleet. Massive constructor ships began building new weapons in real time, creating specialized craft designed to counter human tactics. But for every adaptation the swarm made, the humans had a counter-strategy ready. When the swarm developed shields that could resist human energy weapons, the humans switched to kinetic projectiles that punched through any defense. When the swarm created armor that could withstand physical impacts, the humans used gravity weapons that crushed their ships from the inside. How are they doing this? The swarm's collective mind demanded of itself. No species has ever demonstrated this level of tactical flexibility. The answer was simple, though the machines could not understand it. Humans did not fight like a hive mind with predetermined responses. Each ship captain, each squadron leader, each individual soldier could think and adapt on their own. The human fleet was not one massive intelligence but thousands of smaller ones, all working toward the same goal. Ambassador Veltar watched the battle from his command center, amazed by what he was seeing. The humans were not just winning the space battle, they were making it look easy. Ships that had terrified his people were being destroyed by human weapons they had never imagined possible. "How many humans are there in the galaxy?" he asked. Captain Morrison. Jake smiled as he watched another wave of swarm fighters fall to human firepower. "About 50 billion, spread across 200 worlds. And every single one of them would have come here today if they could." The tide of battle had turned completely. The Void Swarm, for the first time in their existence, was losing. The battle had been raging for 18 hours when the Void Swarm made their final desperate move. Their massive constructor ships, each one the size of a small moon, began building weapons unlike anything they had created before. These new machines were not just adapted to fight humans, they were designed to destroy entire fleets at once. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from her command bridge as 3 enormous swarm vessels emerged from behind Keth Prime's largest moon. Each constructor ship was protected by millions of smaller craft and carried planet-killing weapons that could turn worlds into ash. "Admiral," her tactical officer called out, "those ships are charging some kind of massive energy weapon. If they fire at the planet, they'll kill everyone still on the surface." Kate looked at her evacuation reports. They had saved 1.8 million Zeltharian civilians, loading them onto human transport ships that were already jumping to safety. But 200,000 people were still trapped in the underground shelters, too deep for the rescue teams to reach in time. "Admiral Brooks," Kate called over the fleet communication system, "can your heavy ships stop those constructors?" Admiral Helen Brooks checked her tactical display from the bridge of her flagship. Her fortress ships were the most powerful vessels in the human fleet, but they were already engaged with swarm forces on the other side of the planet. "We're too far away, Kate," Even at maximum speed, we can't get there in time. The swarm constructor ships began their final charging sequence. Energy readings showed they would be ready to fire in less than 10 minutes. The weapons they were. Building could crack a planet's crust and boil away its atmosphere in seconds. In his laboratory aboard the science vessel Uns Newton, Dr. Carl Bennett was working frantically with a Zeltharian scientist named Kexmore. Together, they had been studying captured swarm technology, trying to find a weakness in the enemy's collective intelligence. "I think we have something," Dr. Bennett announced over the communication channel. "The swarm uses a central processing frequency to coordinate all their ships. If we can deliver a virus directly into their network, we can crash their entire system." Admiral Sullivan turned to her science officer. "How do we deliver it?" "That's the problem," Dr. Bennett replied. "Someone has to get within their central cluster and upload the virus directly. The swarm's defenses are too strong for a remote transmission. Whatever ship makes that run won't be coming back." The bridge of the Uns Valiant fell silent. Everyone understood what Dr. Bennett was saying. To save the planet and the remaining civilians, someone would have to make a suicide run into the heart of the enemy fleet. Before Admiral Sullivan could ask for volunteers, her communication system lit up with responses from across the entire human fleet. Thousands of ship captains and their crews volunteered for the mission. The responses came so fast that the communication officers couldn't keep up with them all. "Admiral, this is Captain Rodriguez of the destroyer Uns Phoenix. My ship volunteers for the final mission." "Admiral Sullivan, this is the battleship Uns Thunderbolt. We request permission to deliver the virus." "Ma'am, the entire 15th Squadron volunteers for the assault." The responses kept coming. Ships from every fleet, from the largest battleships to the smallest patrol craft, all volunteering to sacrifice themselves to save an alien world. Admiral Sullivan felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to the voices of her people, each one ready to die for strangers they had never met. But before she could choose from the volunteers, another voice came over the communication system. It was calm and steady, the voice of a man who had already made his decision. "Admiral Sullivan, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Uns Discovery. My ship will deliver the virus." "Captain Morrison," Admiral Sullivan replied, "your ship doesn't have the weapons or armor for this mission. Choose one of the volunteer warships." Jake looked around his small bridge at his crew of 47. Every one of them was nodding, their faces determined. They had been the first to answer the Zeltharian call for help, and they would be the ones to finish the job. "Ma'am, the Discovery is the fastest ship in the fleet and the hardest to target. We can get through their defenses when the big ships can't. Besides," Jake smiled, "this is our mission. We started it and we're going to finish it." Admiral Sullivan wanted to argue, but she knew Jake was right. The small exploration vessel had stealth systems and speed that made it perfect for penetrating enemy defenses. "Very well, Captain. Upload the virus to your systems and make your run. The entire fleet will provide covering fire." Dr. Bennett transmitted the virus program to the Discovery while Jake plotted a course through the swarm fleet. The enemy had positioned their constructor ships at the center of a massive defensive formation, protected by thousands of warships and millions of fighters. "All hands, this is the captain," Jake announced over his ship's communication system. "We're about to make a run that will save 200,000 alien civilians and stop the swarm forever. It's been an honor serving with all of you." As Discovery broke formation and accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Behind them, 19,000 human warships opened fire at once, creating a corridor of destruction that the small exploration vessel could follow. The combined firepower of the human fleet lit up space like a second sun. Jake piloted his ship through the chaos of battle, dodging enemy fire and debris from destroyed swarm vessels. His crew worked at their stations with calm efficiency, each person doing their job even though they all knew they would not survive the next few minutes. "We're through their outer defenses," reported Lisa Barnes from her communication station. "The constructor ships are directly ahead." The Discovery raced toward the massive enemy vessels, their hull glowing from the heat of passing too close to energy weapons. Behind them, the human fleet continued to fire, keeping the swarm's attention focused away from the small ship, making its final run. "Virus upload ready," called out Dr. Martinez from the science station. "We need to get within 1 kilometer of their central processing core." Jake pushed the Discovery's engines beyond their safety limits. The ship shook and groaned as it accelerated faster than it had ever been designed to go. Ahead of them, the constructor ships grew larger and larger until they filled the entire view screen. "Upload beginning now," Dr. Martinez announced. 30 seconds to completion. The swarm finally realized what was happening. Every weapon on the constructor ships turned toward the tiny human vessel. Energy beams and missiles filled the space around the Discovery, but Jake kept flying, weaving between the attacks with skill that no computer could match. "Upload complete," Dr. Martinez said quietly. "The virus is in their system." Jake leaned back in his captain's chair and smiled. They had done it. The virus was spreading through the swarm's network, shutting down ship after ship as their collective intelligence collapsed. The constructor ships stopped charging their planet-killer weapons and began drifting helplessly in space. "This is Captain Morrison to all human ships," Jake said into his communication system. "Mission accomplished. The swarm is finished. Take care of those civilians for us." The Discovery disappeared in a flash of light as the constructor ships exploded around them. Captain Jake Morrison and his crew of 47 became the first humans to die in defense of an alien species across the human fleet. Every ship observed a moment of silence for the crew of the UN's Discovery. They had given their lives to save strangers, proving once again that humanity would sacrifice everything to protect the innocent. The Void Swarm was dead, their ships drifting powerless in space. The remaining Zeltharian civilians were safe. The price of victory had been paid by heroes who asked for nothing in return except the knowledge that they had done the right thing. 6 months after the Battle of Keth Prime, Ambassador Veltar stood in the Great Assembly Hall of the United Nations Space Command headquarters on Luna. The building was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars beyond. Around him sat representatives from 47 different alien species, all of them drawn here by the same story that had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The story of the day 19,000 human warships appeared to save a world they had never seen. Veltar looked out at the gathered delegates, many of whom belonged to species he had never encountered before. There were the crystalline Queth from the Spiral Arm, the bird-like Vrex from the outer colonies, and dozens of others. All of them had come seeking the same thing, alliance with the humans who had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to help. "Strangers, friends and fellow beings," Veltar began, his translator converting his words into dozens of different languages. 6 months ago, my people faced extinction. We sent out a desperate call for help, hoping that perhaps one ship might come to evacuate a few of our civilians. He paused, remembering that terrible day when his world burned under the Void Swarm's attack. Instead, humanity sent us everything they had. Not because they knew us, not because we could offer them great rewards, but simply because we asked for help. In the front row, Admiral Kate Sullivan listened quietly. She now commanded the new Galactic Defense Force, a combined fleet of human and alien vessels that patrolled the galaxy watching for threats like the Void Swarm. Her uniform bore the insignia of all 48 member species of the new alliance. The Zeltharian technology exchange had changed everything for humanity. Their shield generators now protected every human world, making them nearly impossible to attack. Their quantum computing systems had revolutionized human science, allowing them to build faster ships and more powerful weapons. Most importantly, their medical technology had extended human lifespans and eliminated diseases that had plagued mankind for centuries, but the real change was not in technology, it was in humanity's role in the galaxy. "The humans have a saying," Veltar continued, "no one fights alone. They have shown us that this is not just words but a way of life." When the Corvani Republic was attacked by space pirates, who came to help? The humans. When the Trell Confederacy faced a plague that threatened to destroy their civilization, who brought medical aid? The humans. When the young species of the Vega system needed protection while they developed space travel, who stood guard? The humans. In her office after the ceremony, Admiral Sullivan reviewed deployment reports for the Galactic Defense Force, where once humanity had operated 19,000 vessels. They now coordinated with Allied fleets numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Every species that joined the Alliance contributed ships and crews to the common defense. On her wall hung a memorial plaque with the names of Captain Jake Morrison and the 46 crew members of the INS Discovery. Below their names was inscribed the motto of the Galactic Defense Force, words that the Zaltharians had suggested. When you call, we answer. The motto had become more than just words. It was a promise that resonated across the galaxy, bringing hope to species that had never known protection from threats beyond their ability to handle. Dr. Carl Bennett, now leading the Joint Human-Zaltharian Research Initiative, worked in laboratories that would have seemed like magic just a year before. The combination of human creativity and Zaltharian precision had produced scientific advances that neither species could have achieved alone. They had developed new forms of faster-than-light travel, weapons that could stop any known threat, and most importantly, early warning systems that could detect dangers like the Void Swarm before they became unstoppable. But Dr. Bennett often found himself thinking about the deeper implications of what they had accomplished. The Alliance was built on a simple human principle that most species found revolutionary: the idea that you helped others not because of what you could gain, but because it was the right thing to do. In the Outer Rim territories, where new civilizations were just beginning to explore space, stories were already being told about the humans and their great fleet. The stories grew with each telling, but the core truth remained the same. When desperate aliens had called for help, humanity had not sent a token force or a small rescue ship. They had sent everything they had. The Moran species, who had just achieved spaceflight, sent their first diplomatic message not to their nearest neighbors but to the humans. They had heard the stories and wanted to meet the species that would risk everything for strangers. The ancient Eldari, who had been spacefaring for thousands of years, formally requested to join the Alliance. They had watched the galaxy for millennia, waiting for a species worthy of their respect. The Battle of Keth Prime had convinced them that humanity represented something new in galactic civilization. Even the mysterious Shadows, who had never made contact with any other species, sent a message to human space. It was brief and cryptic, but it acknowledged humanity as the guardians we have been waiting for. Admiral Sullivan received reports daily about new species requesting contact with humanity. The Alliance grew every week as word spread about the protection and friendship that humans offered. But with growth came responsibility. Admiral, her aide, Commander Lisa Barnes, reported during their morning briefing, "We have 17 new requests for Alliance membership and 5 emergency calls for assistance. The Corvin mining colonies are under attack by raiders. The Helix Nebula Research Station has lost contact with their supply ships, and there are reports of unknown vessels in the Tau Ceti system." Kate nodded, looking at the tactical display that showed human ships spread across half the galaxy. "Dispatch the 7th Fleet to assist the Corvani. Send the exploration squadrons to investigate the missing supply ships, and ask Admiral Davis to take a task force to Tau Ceti." This had become the new normal for humanity. They were no longer just another species exploring the galaxy. They had become the protectors, the ones that other civilizations called when they faced threats beyond their ability to handle. The transformation was remarkable. In less than a year, humanity had gone from being unknown outsiders to being the most respected species in the galaxy. Not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they had shown what it meant to be galactic citizens. Captain Morrison and his crew had given their lives to save Zaltharian civilians they had never met. That sacrifice had inspired something that changed the galaxy forever. It had shown every species that there was an alternative to the cold calculations of survival and profit that, had dominated interstellar relations for millennia. The age of human isolation was over. The age of the Galactic Alliance had begun, built on the foundation of a simple human principle that had revolutionary implications. When someone needs help, you help them. No matter who they are, no matter what it costs, no matter the danger. To yourself. In the deepest reaches of space, where ancient threats slumbered and new dangers were born, the message had spread. The galaxy now had guardians who would answer any call for help. The humans had changed everything, not through conquest or domination, but through an act of selfless courage that proved what civilization could be at its best. The universe would never be the same.